Now we're going to talk about spline modeling and patch modeling as well. This type of modeling has been around since the beginning of Max, and it's kind of an amalgam of polygonal modeling and NURBS modeling. It allows you to create Bezier splines and Bezier patches and link those together into models. A lot of people like to use patch modeling because it is a fairly straightforward way to model. It's not quite as complex as NURBS, but it has a little bit more control over the curvature of the surface than polygonal modeling. Although with Mesh Smooth, that's kind of blurred the line even more. So I think it's a technology that's kind of in some ways falling out of favor. A lot of people are now modeling polygonally, but there's a lot of really good advantages to modeling with splines. And let me go ahead and show you some of the basic tools, and then we'll get into actually modeling something fairly complex using this method. With spline and patch modeling, you have splines and you have patches. And then you have a technology called surface tools, which allows you to turn groups of splines into a patch network to create complex surfaces. Let's talk first about splines. You can find splines over in the Shapes menu. So go to your Create menu, go to Shapes, and we have a pull down here, NURBS, Curves, and Splines. Under Splines, we have all sorts of basic shapes. We have a line, circle, arcs, n-gons, so a polygon, pentagon, whatever, text, so on and so forth. If you create a line, which you'll be doing probably more often than not, you can create it using a number of different vertices types. For example, if you create your type to corner, it creates corners. So basically just straight lines between the points, almost like a polygonal model. If you do it with smooth as your type and just click, it'll interpolate that and make it into curves. We also have a Bezier type, and how that works is you click and drag, and by dragging you're affecting the curvature of that particular point. So just by clicking and dragging. So I've created 3 separate curves here, and with 3 different corner types. So we have corner, smooth, and Bezier. Now let's go through and look at the Modify panel for splines. When you click on a spline, you're going to have this, the main object is called line, and you hit the plus sign, and we see our different types of sub-objects. We have vertex, segment, and spline. Very similar to Edit Mesh, so you can also click those here. We have a couple of rollouts up here that we can go through. One is rendering. You can actually render splines. So if you click Renderable and hit the render, you can see that each one of these splines actually does render. Or actually this particular spline rendered because I clicked it as renderable. You also have interpolation. So how many steps does it take to in between points? So at 0 points it's just straight lines. 1, it just adds curvature. So how many different basically line segments are between the vertices? I think it defaults to 5 or 6. And then you have your selection. Now there's different types of sub-objects, as we mentioned before. We have vertex, so those are our vertices. And if I want, I can move those around and edit those just like anything else. And these ones here have Bezier handles, so I can also edit the Bezier handles that I just created. We also have segments. Now segments are the points between, almost like an edge in polygonal modeling. It's the line between the points. We also have the spline, the whole spline itself. Now we can have multiple splines within one of these main objects. So if I want, I can scroll down here to Geometry and click on Attach, and I can actually attach other objects into this. So now I have all of these are listed as one object. So I go into so I click off sub-object, and now I have, that's one object to max. Just like it is with polygonal modeling, you can have multiple objects or multiple entities within an Edit Mesh modifier, for example. You can also create lines within Edit Mesh. So you just click on Create Line, pick your initial type, and you can just draw whatever you want. Click off of that, and I've got another spline that I can use with all the others. Let's go through and talk a little bit about each of these sub-object types. Vertex is the one you're going to probably deal with the most. Now, when you click on vertex, the rollout basically changes. So we have, for example, we go to spline, certain ones highlight. You go to segment, certain ones highlight. When you go to vertex, a lot of ones highlight. Now, with vertices, one thing that we have to take into account is that vertices in these splines do have an order, and that order affects a lot of different things. Like if you create a surface out of a spline, it's going to affect which way the normals face. If you link them together into a surface, or if you link splines together, the order of the vertices sometimes has an effect. So if you want, this little square vertex always represents the start of the line. This is the first place I click. This is the first vertex in that line. So you always know that this big square vertex is vertex number 1. If you want to see what all of these are, you can just click here and go show vertex numbers. It'll actually give you a number for each one of these vertices. Now, when editing a vertex, you can certainly use soft selection just like you do with any other type of modeling. So if I want, I can create a fall off and just crank it up. Now notice how, because all of these are in the same, all of these are part of the same object, the soft selection works for all of them. If I click edge distance, it just works on that particular spline. So very similar to polygonal modeling. I'll click that off. Now let's go down to the geometry section. We've already talked a little bit about creating lines and doing attach. We also have another function here called refine, which basically just allows us to insert more vertices within the line. We also have what's called weld, connect, fuse. So, for example, if you want to create a longer spline, let's say we want to tie two splines together. Let's say I have this outside spline, and I want to make another spline. So I create a line, and I want to extend that for some reason. I can just take these two vertices and move them together, and I can weld them. Here, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select both of these, and I just hit weld. Now, if it doesn't weld at first, it means it's probably not close enough together. So I hit weld and it doesn't weld. They're not close enough together. We have this little function here called fuse. In fact, let me go ahead and zoom in here. And what fuse does is it just puts them right on top of each other. And then you can weld, and now we have one spline. Now, if we want, you can also do what's called make first. So you can make any one of these vertices the first vertex in the line. So either this one or this one. We also have what's called a reverse. So it allows us to reverse the direction of a spline. Now that's actually for when we're editing a spline sub-object. The reverse is, so we'll get to that. We also have things such as fillet and chamfer. And you can also hide or unhide vertices, that sort of thing. Let's go to segment. Now again, we can select segments, move them around. You also have soft selection, which works on segments. And there's really not much you can do with editing segments except for hide and unhide. So really segments are just for editing. We can also go to spline. Now we have some more options there. So I can select each spline. And I can do stuff such as reverse. So that reverses my order. Create what's called an outline. So that's great for doing stuff like if you want to create text or something like that. You can take a spline here, create an outline, which is great for that sort of stuff. You can also do stuff like booleans and mirrors, so I can actually subtract one spline from the other. And of course we can hide and unhide splines just as we can with segments and vertices. So those are the basics of spline modeling. Now let's move on to patches, and we'll talk about those for a little bit.